Parks and Rec is the entire reason I chose public administration as my bachelor's during the pandemic. It did that for a lot of people. You're not the only one. Yeah.
Goals.
There's people that are in Parks and Rec that take pictures of their young kids at their computers. They're like, future Leslie Knope. Yeah. It's generational. Like, it's going to keep going. What? Okay. So if Parks and Rec isn't your thing, do you have a
West Wing?
One of my favorite things that you say about economic development, which I promise is one of the things we'll talk about today.
Yes.
But one of my favorite things you say about it, and several of your colleagues say the same thing, is that people just accidentally fall into economic development.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you've been in your role for what, like 3?
Oh, not even 2 years yet. 2 years next month.
I can only that. So like, me through the things that happened before you accidentally ended up in economic development.
Yeah. Okay. So the reason I started working with economic developers and then took like a 15-year hiatus and then came back. So I came out of grad school in 2008, right as the reset. Like, I remember sitting in my internship watching the stock market go woo and being like, oh, this is a great time to find a job. So it was 2008 or no, sorry, 2009. Sorry, 2009. And I was doing social media consulting back when social media was new and people were actually, what is this thing? And I got hired by a publishing company, was sort of doing that, but I felt like I wasn't really doing what my master's degree was in, which was mass communication with a focus on nonprofit public relations. Like, that's what I went to school for. And so I started volunteering with a local nonprofit called Gangplank, which was one of the first co-working spaces in the state. And it had a relationship, Gangplank had a relationship with the city of Chandler. The city of Chandler at the time, which was headed by Christine Mackey, was looking to build their entrepreneurial profile. They had intel. They wanted to build a whole tech corridor. They were installing fiber. Like, they were really doubling down on entrepreneurship and small business. And so we essentially provided that programming in space, like almost, we were an accelerator and an incubator kind of all together one. And we were figuring it out as we went. So I was the executive director of that space. And that was my first experience working with economic development. I wasn't doing economic development in the sense of I was working for a city or an economic development team, but I was certainly part of that ecosystem by supporting small businesses. And so then I took a hard detour and went into marketing and operations for 15 years in corporate America and worked for small businesses and startups and tech companies. Very common. A lot of people in marketing actually do come into economic development because if you think about it, economic development is selling a community to businesses and selling that community selling those benefits to the community members. So that's not surprising that a lot of us with these types of backgrounds gravitate towards this type of work. So I came back to economic development because I was tired of making money for some corporate overlord on the East Coast or abroad and not impacting anything that was happening. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to find something local, and this job just happened to be a good fit. And it's funny because the board member, Jennifer Lindley, who referred me to this job, I worked with 12 years ago in city of Chandler. So long memories in this state, but that's kind of, a sample of a story of how various different types of backgrounds can bring to economic development. And I'm by far not the most unique story. When you look at, I actually just did a bunch of research last night for an article that we're doing of some of the stories, like Erica Sturwell-Rolfs from SRP. She's a senior economic development project manager. She used to do PR for Phoenix Children's. And then before that, she worked for private PR companies. So it's just, when you think about media training and being able to talk to the public, that's pretty important still for SRP, even though she's not in their public relations department, she's at their economic development. And we have another member who did 22 years of film production before coming into economic development. We have police officers. We have people that have done internships at pretty much every economic development organization in the state, ACA, GPEC. So it's just kind of funny that there's a mix of folks that come into the profession.
As I get more and more involved and learn about it, I'm also just realizing it attracts the most interesting and dynamic people and personalities. You struck me as someone that is very well versed and very skilled in multiple different areas, and I feel like a lot of your peers are the same way.
Yeah, economic development is one of those classic professions where you have to know a little bit about a lot. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that it was always that way. I think economic development, as with many industries, at one point had more purity in the sense that you were just focused on business attraction and retention.
Mhm.
But communities have become more complex, and community members expect more from their communities. And as government has gotten more complex, all of that creates additional challenges. And I think we're also realizing that you can't solve one problem without solving the other. So if you look at workforce development as an issue, very complex. There's all sorts of different ways that you can address that. And you just did an excellent podcast about how refugees are an example of how we could be doing that. There's also Department of Corrections and second
Mhm.
chances. So there's lots of different avenues that we could address that. But workforce development is only one part of how someone interacts with a community. They have to live somewhere. They have to go to the library. They have to drive on roads. So while we might have a workforce, we might not have housing for that workforce,
Mhm.
or we might not be providing childcare for both parents to be able to work, or we might not have great roads or great transportation for them to get to those jobs.
Mm.
So I think that's why economic developers are often multi-talented, Jack and Jill of all trades, because I think they recognize that there's a large swath of challenges that sort of all need to be part of a conversation. And they need to be consensus builders and find a way to bring all those people to the table and say, this is the challenge. How are you going to contribute to it? So ultimately, there's a small set of skills I think all economic developers have to have, but the
Mhm.
level of knowledge has to be very.
I want to come back to some of those logistics you highlighted. I also want to rebrand my podcast and call it Consensus Builders. So thank you so much for that. But let me take it back even another step because we're just throwing around this term economic development, which for me, I've been very transparent about this until, I don't know, 12 months ago. That was just a fun term that I probably picked up out of a textbook. And now it's something that I'm trying to live and breathe and understand. But people outside of maybe these four walls might not think it's the sexiest term in the world and
Mhm.
understand it. But you have a really lovely, I think, definition of economic development that you use, and I don't want to butcher it. So, how do you describe it?
Well, the joke is that it's economic development is whatever anybody says it is. And that's kind of the ongoing joke about economic development. But really, when you think about what makes a community, when you
Mhm.
talk about quality of life, and I think all of us can define quality of life in a pretty easy way. I mean, it's going to be unique to each person, but we can all define it. That has to be funded and supported in some way.
Mm.
So there's an economy that needs to support quality of life. So economic development is the development or the investment or the time put into making sure that the businesses are in that area, they're attracted, they're sustainable in that area, that we are collecting revenue to be able to invest that back into the community. So that's and when you think about business attention and attraction, that's everything that's involved in business attention and attraction. What's going to support that business? So that, like I said, infrastructure, workforce, utilities,
Mhm.
education, and then all the quality of life pieces. So if you're an average everyday citizen you're enjoying going down to your main street for First Friday, a lot of that are economic development ecosystem members at work. You have the
Mm.
businesses, you have the nonprofits that are organizing it, you have the organizations that are investing time and money into making sure that those businesses are supported. So like your SBDCs or your incubators and accelerators. So all of that's at work, but you're just a community member out on a Friday night, just having a good time.
Mhm.
And so I think that's what's unique is we're all part of it, but we also all enjoy the benefits of it.
And I think not everyone realizes that they're a part of it, and that's a big component of what made me want to get more involved. I feel that your organization that you oversee, there's an Association of Economic Development, we'll probably toss in AAED for short moving forward. It, it it's connected to all of them. Like you mentioned, the small businesses, the big businesses, the nonprofits, the governments, the chambers, all of them fall under
Mhm.
Arizona economic development as a big bucket. And I feel that not everyone that I interact with, and when I say like the people I interact with, these are important people, like members of our communities. They're not dialed in to what is happening in our state all the time. And
Mhm.
I'm really big proponent of looking not just at all the exciting things that are happening at the global stage, that are happening in Arizona, but also just what's happening in our backyards. So that's what really attracted me to the organization.
It's okay if not everyone is dialed into economic development, but it is important that they're dialed into this specific area that's of passion to them. Like Look at chambers. So we have a lot of chambers that are members of AAED, and that's because they're focused on business development and they're focused on business retention. So they
Mhm.
want to make sure that all of those businesses feel supported and they're building a community for those businesses. So chambers are economic development organizations. So the chamber themselves, the chamber professionals, will interact with us and be a part of our membership because they want to connect with economic developers because they're part of that puzzle. But the small businesses that they support aren't
Mm.
necessarily going to be members of ours because we're not providing direct resources to those businesses. The
Yeah.
chambers are. So in a way, we're sort of a hub for the spokes that exist in economic development. So we're seeking to bring together folks that are innovators and engaged and passionate about what they do in their piece of economic development to bring that back to the whole so we can all collaborate and figure out how best to build those partnerships, to build those regional collaborations, and then share best practices.
I like the way you described it as kind of the hub and the spokes on the wheel. But can you talk a little bit about AAED, like what it actually is, the organization, its mission, just high
Yeah.
level?
So the Arizona Association for Economic Development serves as the unified voice for economic development professionals across the state, providing education, opportunities for collaboration, but also advocating for economic development best practices. So that's the vision mission statement in a soundbite. So unlike, say, the Arizona Commerce Authority or Greater Phoenix Economic Council or some of these other economic development organizations that people are familiar with, we don't have a hand in bringing projects or retaining projects here in the state. So if you look at the ACA, they invest millions of dollars into programs that support, like they just announced the Space Aerospace Council and or the Small Business Consortium that they just put together. Those are fantastic resources for our state. We are focused on the professionals. So the folks who are from the ACA or from GPEC, we want them to be able to connect as individuals because we all know how important personal relationships are. So we're bringing those individuals together to talk about the big problems, to commiserate a little bit, share some of the challenges. But then also, like I was saying, spread those best practices because
Mhm.
even though every community in Arizona is beautiful and unique, challenges are similar and solutions can be shared. So that's one of the main things I think we offer. But also there's a level of education. Economic development is not a profession in the sense that there is a degree or certification that's offered by traditional educational institutions for this career path. Many folks will get public policy, government, business administration, their MPAs, but there isn't like a economic development degree coming out of ASU. So one of the critical things we do is for folks that are coming from these non-traditional paths is we're very focused on education. So we provide the AZD Pro certification, which is really designed for folks within their first 5 years in the industry to catch them up as quickly as possible on all the different aspects of economic development. So I would say education is probably one of our most critical roles in addition to sort of being this coalescing place for individuals who are professionals in the industry.
I'm glad you mentioned the degree and the education portion because I actually never even thought to look at that. So, without, because I could talk about higher education forever, but specific to your world, do you feel like ASU or other colleges should be offering some sort of degree, or you feel like the program you guys have, I know is great because I see all the colleagues that have it and are doing great work,
Mhm.
but is that something that you wish?
There are programs and degrees that already exist that need to have an economic development component. So, for example, ASU's MPA program. They're starting to and have sections that are dedicated to understanding the economic development profession. They have economic development professionals that come in and talk about aspects of that. Government administration is certainly something that is discussed, and government administration has a very big tie-in to how economic development works because economic development directors report up into city management. But I do think that there is a way to integrate awareness about the economic development profession into traditional degree programs. I also think it's super critical that we start teaching younger folks, just like a lot of professions. STEM has done this in an amazing way. Hey, government's cool. Like working in economic development's awesome. Like you should consider this as a career path and exposing younger people to what these jobs are so that they can go into, public administration or business administration or government advocacy or law, becoming a lawyer or whatever it is that they want to do and see like I can apply those skills in this profession.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, I came from marketing, and many of us come from marketing. And there is a place for that in the economic development profession, and not just in the public space. Like, yes, we need project management specialists in marketing and business development within economic development in municipalities, but also there's a whole private side to economic development, commercial real estate, architecture, engineering, all the support services that come with business retention and expansion, marketing, what you do. So I think that also folks who are passionate about those types of careers, like you can go into sort of the, what they call ACEC profession and still be supporting and involved in economic development. You're just doing it from the private side versus
Mhm.
public.
Do you think someone who's just graduated high school or college can immediately enter into some type of economic development role and be successful?
So that's tough. There aren't really internships that exist with municipalities. So now there are internships that exist with nonprofit or economic development organizations. So, like, chambers are a great way to get into the world without necessarily having a degree. Some of these regional economic development organizations offer those opportunities, but there is that barrier to having a degree to be in a lot of these, to at least get entry level roles. So that's something as a profession, just like a lot of professions are looking
Most,
at.
yeah.
Do we need to have those degrees, or is there some way we can offer some other path into the profession, whether it's through service in some other jobs, or is there, a skill set? I think, to me, I think economic development hires for, I think I call it, they're the 3 Ps: problem solving, passion, people skills. While there are important skills, like you need to understand like development agreements and you need to understand how, a project is put together, for sure. Those things can be taught, though.
In terms of getting younger people excited or engaged, at least in terms of government and community, I feel like there's a passion and a frustration there about wanting a better world.
Mhm.
And to your point, maybe not just economic development world, but certain employers could do a better job about opening the door and inviting those individuals in, no matter what their education or experience might look like.
Yeah. And there are organizations that understand and recognize this. Like, civic engagement is
Yeah.
not unique to economic
Yeah.
development. That is, lots of professions need younger people to be civically engaged. As a nation, we need younger people to be civically engaged.
What?
I know, shocker. Like, I think there actually was, I read an article the other day that it's one country in Europe is considering lowering the voting age. It was 18
Ooh.
or 16. And so someone brought it up that maybe that's something we should consider in the United States. And I think that that would be great. Like, there shouldn't be this barrier, at 18
Yeah.
to vote when you're starting to pay taxes potentially at 16, if you're starting to work. So, but that's a whole other side tangent I could go on about young people voting. But there are lots of organizations that do have great civic engagement programs. So I think part of it is just making sure that those civic engaged folks understand that it's running for office is important. But if that's
Mhm.
not something that you're passionate about, there are other things you can do in civic engagement. So, like,
Mhm.
the Arizona League of Cities and Towns, which is meeting right now,
Yep.
they do the flag ceremony at the beginning where each community's youth that are part of the civic organization or youth organization, like, bring in their flag, and they're so proud and they're so committed and excited about their communities.
Mm.
Like, those are the kids that we need to be like, hey, economic development over here. You know, let's grab you. I think of, like, Rotary clubs are another great place. Like, they get kids in middle school and high school. So I think it's, there's things that are out there that exist that are getting kids starting to think about civic engagement. We just need to help them understand, like, hey, you could build a career out of this other than just, public office or, working in your local government office.
Scene that's just like constantly in my mind, as especially as I'm hearing you talk about all the different entities and organizations. It's just it's it's a little complicated. There are so many organizations, companies. It's so difficult to keep track of who's doing what and why and partnering with who. I feel like it's so challenging to keep track of all the players and responsibilities. And that's not a question. That's just my
Yeah, this is the reality.
observation.
You asked AI, you're like, could you please create a landscape of the economic development ecosystem? And you sent it to me, and I was like, oh, this is actually pretty not bad. I think the thing that's challenging is we could create a list of all the economic development organizations. It's the relationships and how they work next to or with each other that are a little bit more challenging. And some of that is there's some natural overlap in organizations and the work we do that exists. Duplicity exists in all sorts of industries. And that's because we're trying to solve big challenges. So there have to be lots of players. But I think the thing that's really beautiful about Arizona, and granted, I'm saying this without having worked in economic development in any other state, is we are competitive for sure, but we're also really collaborative. At the end of the day, we want Arizona to be successful. So I think you're seeing that a lot of these economic development organizations recognize there are natural connection points that need to be built and expanded. So one of the things when I came into AAED, I'm a collaborator by nature because I don't want to do extra work. No, I'm kidding.
Shocking.
I don't like waste. I like efficiency. And so it doesn't make sense for me to build something in our organization if somebody else is doing it great anyway. So one of the critical things that was important to me was building relationships with a lot of these organizations that are on, parallel to what we do. So you have like Valley Partnership, which is in the commercial real estate space. You have ULI, which is in the public planning, urban planning. You have NAOP, which also commercial real estate space. So there's lots of great organizations out there that, they're doing their own advocacy. It's like, okay, well, let's trade and talk about what are the things that you care about, what are the things that I care about, where is their overlap, where are their, natural partnership points, and figuring out how to move forward with those. But it's not small. We're a big state with a very large, Maricopa region, and then each of the, counties outside of that have their own ecosystems that exist too. So, and they all have to work together. Like if you look at one of the things I think is really special that's happening right now, you have Maricopa County, you have Pinal County, and you have Pima County.
Mhm.
And you have Pinal acting as this corridor and building out that relationship between two of our biggest cities in the state and really making that into sort of this mega region that goes all the way to Mexico. And now you have Yuma and you have Douglas and you have all these amazing port cities that are getting involved in that conversation. Like we are building a true, you know, international trade ecosystem that I think is just incredible. And the forward thinking that's being put into that and investment that's being put into that is it's just awesome.
Yeah, the level of collaboration that my eyes have been open to, because sometimes I think going back to our comments about government and why people occasionally get disenfranchised, sometimes you get caught up in the bureaucracy. Sometimes the right players are in the wrong room or so on and so forth. But the thing that has my eyes have been open to is just the amount of collaboration that is happening. But sometimes it just doesn't get the platform or attention that it deserves, which I think that's why these conversations are so important and helpful.
Well, and I will say that the collaborations extend to a certain point. I would say that the environment for economic development in Arizona can be a challenge when it comes to our elected officials. So you may or may not be aware that Arizona has the gift clause that basically said public money can't be used for private benefit. So you can't pay your money into the government and then they turn around and give it to Meta, Facebook. And so because we have that gift clause, it becomes weaponized.
Mm.
And so folks who have an agenda of, I don't want certain types of projects or certain types of initiatives to exist in that state will utilize that gift clause to say you are in violation and therefore you can't do these activities. And that can be a real challenge for economic development. When you're attracting businesses, you need incentives. Businesses are looking for ripe environments that provide them with a good benefit, a friendly environment for their business to come in. And I'm not saying we need to give away the farm, but there certainly are things that businesses need in order to be productive and profitable and to be able to expand and continue to bring in new jobs. And we just don't have those types of tools here in our state. So when you look at how competitive Arizona is against Texas and Florida and our neighbors, we're doing that with one hand tied behind our back. So it's amazing to me if we were to not open the floodgates, but provide a little bit more opportunity for economic development to really go full throttle, what we could bring in and what we could do for a lot of our communities. So there are some challenges in our political environment that make it difficult for economic developers to do their job effectively. I think going back to collaboration, one of the things that AAED, myself, and other organizations are trying to do is educate our members on how to be good advocates.
Mm.
Like tell the story of what economic development does. Because like you said, not everyone knows what this is. And that includes our own elected officials. just because you get elected doesn't mean you now all of a sudden have all the knowledge of all the people that came before you.
Yeah, this isn't the Matrix. You just have to get
No,
things done.
I know. Wouldn't that be great? That's one of the things that I think was one of the biggest, and I don't know why I never thought about it before, but like walking into this, like elected officials don't just know everything because they were elected. You have to teach and explain and educate. And so now the problem is there's a lot of us trying to educate, and in there is definitely the noise of so many things. But a lot of us in this profession are trying to find ways to make sure that our elected officials understand what the impact of economic development is. And it's not just pretty stories and quality of life. These are real number and real revenue, real data that impacts decision making for the state that we want to make sure that they're aware of. And so it's a challenge because they're busy and they're inundated by a lot of stuff, but it's a really important message because we're talking about the future of our state. And it's not just bringing people in. I think a lot of people like stop growth. Okay, we get that. To a point, economic development growth might not be the best thing for every type of community or in every space, but we should have the freedom to decide what great community and what economic growth looks like for our city, region, state. And we should have tools that allow us to do that.
A local example that comes to mind for me, selfishly, is I live in East Valley, Apache Junction, basically. And there's so much development happening over there. But there's a very clear line. These are all 55 and up communities and trailer parks and properties and hotels that haven't been managed very well. And then $500,000 brand new builds right down the road at the base of the mountains. And I love to see the development that's happening. We have brand new businesses coming in, big businesses. We have small businesses coming in. We have some businesses that have been around forever that are getting revitalized with new people coming in. But because I'm in the community talking to the business owners, the nonprofits, and my neighbors, I know that there is such a disconnect between who wants this evolution and who, term you taught me, but I can't remember how to pronounce the acronym, not in my backyard. What is it?
Not in my backyard is NIMBYism. Yes, in my backyard is YIMBYism. Because, there's got to be a catchphrase.
Yeah. Well, I don't know who's a NIMBY or EMB.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a disconnect. And something I would love to see is that our community members get more involved in these kinds of conversations so that they're not just venting in Facebook groups. They can actually, or you know what, I'll flip the script. Instead, maybe we invite some of our elected officials into the Facebook groups.
Oh, gosh. Can you imagine?
I actually can.
I think there's a number of reasons why it can be frustrating as a community member.
Yeah.
So one, there are some areas that are focused more on growth and revitalization.
Yeah.
And so that is a challenge. So there is a balance that needs to exist of attraction versus investing in what is already here. But the other thing I would say is economic development economic developers think in terms of decades. Yes, there are 5-year plans. Yes, there are daily activities and there are short-term things that occur. But one of my favorite things to think about is the city of Phoenix.
Okay.
I have been in Arizona combined over 15 years. I took a little break when the Pacific Northwest came back. We don't need to talk about that. When I lived in downtown Phoenix in 2008, there was nothing there. It was the Lost Leaf, and First Friday had empty lots in between. And what else? Like, I'm trying to think. There was the Footprint Center, whatever it was called then, but there wasn't really anything bringing the different disparate areas together. Like, you went downtown, to one area. Yeah. Like, I lived at Roosevelt, so I basically stayed at Roosevelt and didn't really go anywhere else. Now you look at Phoenix and it is the destination. And that's part of, they started with Walter Cronkite. I was the first year of the school downtown. Now you have 7 schools down there? The Bioscience Center, the law school, Cronkite. I don't even know how many are down there. Plus you have U of A and NAU all have campuses down there. So Phoenix had to say, we're going to bring in Cronkite. We're going to bring in one ASU campus. 10 years later, here's where we're at. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's really critical when you're a community member in a community. Keep in mind that decisions that are made about certain things might not be clear in that year or that moment.
Mhm.
What the direction is might not be clear, but the benefit might be in 5 years or 10 years. So, and that's where it's really important, like you said, to participate in the process and not just if you're upset, but if you support it.
Yeah, I think especially I don't know how much of a direct tie there is in this, but I wouldn't be surprised how short attention spans have
Oh
become.
gosh,
And
yeah.
now you're asking people to have a 10-year vision while also, to be fair, because I always try to play devil's advocate, people are just trying to like pay their bills and
Mhm.
feed their families and not drown on TikTok, doom scrolling. And so all of a sudden you say, yeah, we're going to knock down some buildings and put in this big thing down the road.
Mhm.
And then everyone's up in arms. I can see both sides for sure. But I like especially what you said of in the times when you support it and you can get behind the longer term vision, be just as vocal then as you are in the times when you're critical.
Yeah. If we care about businesses succeeding and we want it to be local businesses, we have to invest our dollars locally. And this is why I'm a big fan of Local First AZ. And
Yep.
this is a great economic development organization that does amazing work in both metro and rural communities and understands the value of small businesses, and that keeping small businesses or retaining the businesses that are there is so important to the fabric that is a community. But as a community member, you can't rail against something and then spend your dollars there.
So much that we can do as community members that contribute to economic development
Hmm.
in a really positive, meaningful way and not the 10-year vision. I'm talking like helping your neighbors not shut down their businesses. Thank you for coming to
Yeah.
my TED Talk.
Yeah. I do find that interesting, the fact that communities in the Phoenix metro region are very much like, I stay where I'm at. And
Mm,
that's nothing bad. If you, especially if you're commuting to work and you're going 20, 30 minutes every way,
yeah.
you don't want to necessarily have to do that again at night, to go to something else. Like you're going to stay in your area. But one of the best parts about my job is that I get to drive all over the state. And it, as much as I'm a homebody, I get so excited about finding that one cool place in every city. And like, I just got to visit Stafford and Thatcher, had never been before. Shout out to the Stafford airport, by the way. I haven't taken a flight, but I found out that they have $99 flights from Phoenix to Stafford. And you don't have to go through security and you just drive right up to the terminal. And then they have like a Tahoe on the other side that takes you to the car rental place. Like, easiest thing in the world to get all the way to the other side. It's like a 15-minute flight. Like,
Full
that's
trip.
so worth it. But I went to Stafford and like I had ice cream downtown with Lucky Charms on top of it. Not revolutionary by any means, but had I been offered that anywhere else, I don't remember seeing that at my local froyo place in Phoenix. Like, it just, like, something very silly that stuck in my mind, and it's a special moment. And now
Yeah.
I'm always going to associate this really fun memory with the city of Stafford. And so I think that Arizonans, but Phoenicians in particular,
Mm,
because we all tend to stick in our areas, like, take a moment to find a different business and a different, like, my husband and I just went and saw Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the original, got re-released in theaters. The only place was playing was Cinemark Mesa. So we drove the 25 minutes from Midtown, and I'm like, this is the best theater. Like, the seats were really nice.
a
The popcorn was
100%.
great. Like, and I was like, just because, we wanted to see this specific movie and it wasn't showing anywhere else. I'm like, this needs to happen. We need to get out of
Yeah.
our boroughs a little bit and explore some of these cool areas that exist elsewhere. Cause let me tell you, the pride in these communities,
Yeah.
like economic developers. So we do this every month. We do a new member orientation and info session for AAED.
Mm.
And our question for the, warm up to get everybody sort of excited is, what's your favorite city or town in Arizona? And when economic developers come in from a city or town,
Yeah.
they're like, well, I'm not going to say anything else because this is the best city ever.
Yep.
And they tell us all their reasons. That's why I do what I do. That's why I took this job, is I love that pride.
Realizing you and I share something else in common is that we treat traveling and commuting in Arizona as if we were tourists. And that's
Yes.
something I would encourage everyone to do because we've already covered it, but Arizona truly is a massive state. There's so much to explore. And had I not been willing to drive the whopping 30 minutes outside of Apache Junction,
Mhm.
I never would have fell in love with Superior. I never would have ended up going out further to Miami and Globe and going to Phoenix Global Forum and meeting you. Like, we're all so connected. And like the world is a large place, but it's also so freaking tiny.
Yeah.
Like it's wild once you start experiencing the different connections. So yeah, be a tourist in your own backyard for goodness sake.
Yeah.
It's well worth it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about some of the bigger problems and opportunities that AAED is focused on because that's one of the things you mentioned earlier in this conversation that as economic developers, I'm including myself now, are all trying to collaborate in a meaningful way to tackle big problems. So, what are some of the big problems that are on your mind or AAEDs?
Well, what AED is trying to tackle and what economic development is trying to tackle are very different things. I
Fair
mean,
play.
not necessarily very different, but obviously large versus small.
Yeah.
So I would say as an organization, a couple of the things that we're specifically focusing on, I mentioned how important education is to us. We have really become the certifying organization for young or new to the profession economic developers. I will say it doesn't necessarily mean young. We have lots of economic development professionals who come in mid-career, which is great. So that AZED Pro certification is a really critical part of that journey. And I'm very thankful to all the people that came before me who have built the authority of that certification. But it's what happens after that that is sort of the next problem that we want to tackle. So there are lots of economic developers that have been in the profession for 16 plus years, 11 plus years. We're seeing that demographic part get bigger every year when we do our member survey. So there's clearly a need for sort of that advanced experience education. And maybe not, it's not so much education as it is a cohort of people, a think tank that can really share and be comfortable and vulnerable with each other, find support, but also be more specific in how they are sharing and learning from each other.
Mm,
So one of the things that we're exploring is that mid-career and sort of advanced career education and what
mhm,
that looks like. So whether that's a leadership program or some sort of separate track that we're offering, I think is really important because if we want to continue to elevate the economic development profession, we want to keep people in the profession as long as humanly possible, which is I think great. And a lot of economic developers think of their jobs in terms of long tenure because it takes a long time to build communities. So I think that's one area. But in terms of other areas that I think economic development has challenges and opportunities, I think that our utilities, water, power are always a conversation. And that's not just in economic development. That's everyone should care what's happening with our infrastructure.
mhm,
So really the goal of AED is to make sure that we're educating on what's the reality and what's behind the hype or some of the news that's out there. So, for example, data centers are a very big topic right now, and we are a state that's incredibly attractive to this industry, but that's coming with some consequences and some downsides that we are now starting to consider and address. So, AED wants to make sure that economic development professionals across the state can choose and select what's best for their communities. And so we just did an event where we gave, 9 different folks from different perspectives talking about what are the upsides and downsides of having a data center in your community. So I think making sure that we're not only educating about the profession, but we're also taking these lightning rod issues and challenges that are coming up and providing as much context, research, and data as possible so that people can make informed decisions. I think the other main one that we try to address and really build through collaborations is there can be that rural metro tension. I certainly understand where that can exist because things can get lost when you have a lot of the population in a specific area of the state. There is a rural story to be told, and there are some amazing, innovative things that are happening in rural communities. And so I think one of those things is not only making sure that the rural communities are sharing with each other. So what is working in Safford can also work in Kingman or Lake Havasu City, but also helping educate how things can transition between rural and metro communities to be super valuable because a lot of our economic development professionals move between those types of communities.
mhm.
So we want to make sure that there are sort of evergreen lessons and evergreen resources that can exist between both that need to be discussed and shared. So reducing some of that tension that exists and really just making it about what's the best economic development practice and how can it be adjusted or or changed or morphed or whatever into something that works for your specific community.
Yeah, I think that rural and metro piece is so important, and not a lot of people are dialed into it unless they happen to live in one of those communities. But something that comes to mind for me is Apache Junction, Superior, right next to each other. You have, of course, the Resolution Copper, the mining industry out in Superior, but Apache Junction is right at that back door. And I was talking with both communities and came to the realization that, hey, Resolution Copper and Superior is going to have an influx of employees not that far away. There's no housing in Superior to take those guys on, guys, girls, and everyone in between. And then Apache Junction also doesn't really have any housing for those individuals. I mean, I mentioned earlier, we've got $500,000 homes in a master plan community right down the road. But outside of that, I mean, I'm renovating a double wide out in that
Yeah.
area. So it's like, how can we make sure that these communities are also collaborating with one another to support one another? Because what's good for one is going to be good for the other neighbor
Yeah.
ultimately.
And affordable housing is one of those things where everyone's got to get in the picture.
Oh,
So
it breaks my soul.
when you talk about issues that really coalesce everybody and need to be solved by everybody, affordable housing is one of those. It, you know, there is a missing middle that exists. And I think every community is a little bit guilty of developing at one end of the spectrum and not looking at that middle group. Some of that, I think there's a lot of different potential solutions to that. Obviously, there's an incentivizing the developers to make it profitable for them to develop middle income housing. There's things we can be doing at the state legislature and on city councils to make zoning more attractive for that type of housing. For example, I live in a townhouse. Love it. I don't want to maintain my yard. Are you kidding me? I want all the benefits of having a house without any of the responsibility of like my roof or my gardening.
Katie said, I am not a property manager. That is one job I did not sign up for.
There are not very many townhomes or condos in Arizona because we have stricter development rules around so wouldn't it be great if more people could live in these types of developments if we relax some of those rules and regulations? So I think as a state, does not matter where you are, rural, urban, metro, does not matter what type of community you are. All of us need to be working to solve that particular issue. And that's a national issue too. So there's a whole lot that could be going on at the federal level too. But because I'm a state organization, I'm just going to focus on Arizona.
I was just looking up because you mentioned zoning, which reminded me, I heard a presentation by Thomas Galvin. I think it was the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors chairman. And it was the first time I heard someone mention how outdated zoning was and how he and the team were working to address it to be able to create more housing opportunities. And it was just this moment of aha for me where I was like, oh, how many things are just out of date and haven't been looked at for decades that are these invisible handcuffs? And you mentioned too, having Arizona having our hand tied behind our back because of the, what's it called?
Gift clause.
Gift clause, thank you. These things that just haven't been revisited in so many years that are stunting our ability to create more opportunity. Not even economic growth from the sense of bringing new in, but even just making what we have better. Again, not a question there.
Yeah.
Just
an observation.
Just an observation.
But that's where you get this challenge and you get community opposition. It's some of this, these regulations, but it's also, I don't want more traffic. I don't want more people living near me because in a lot of ways we've been indoctrinated to the American dream for better or for worse, where I have my house with my white picket fence and my 2.5 kids. And this is my world. I own this and this is mine and don't take it from me. And I think that we've created a very like individualistic culture.
Yes.
That is now leading to what we're seeing now of the community opposition of, I don't want more in this neighborhood, put it someplace else. And it's like, but if you want the benefits of a fruitful, thriving community, these things are necessary.
That's really interesting because I do sense a disconnect pretty frequently amongst different communities. And we talked about how it's not just Arizona, right? Like everyone is dealing with the same issues all over the world. But I will say, coming from the East Coast and growing up in Baltimore where all of our yards basically bled into one another. Like my grass was your grass. I knew the neighbors, da da da. Arizona's not that way. A lot of fences, not
Mhm.
just the white picket. I'm talking like the cinder block fortress. And because you did mention you lived in a different state, is there something specific in Arizona that you find people are very much like, I build this thing, I make this blocked fence, and this is mine? Is there something about like
Oh, well,
old
that
school Western
goes,
front?
yes, that goes all the way back to barbed wire.
Yeah.
Is when you think about it, free range.
Mm.
And I'm not going to be the foremost authority on the history of the state or Western culture or ranching. So take what I say with a grain of salt.
Yeah, these cowgirl boots are for
But
fashion.
they talk about like the West was tamed by barbed wire.
Mm.
And it used to be free range cattle. Like, think about cattle drives, and they would just go across the United States through whatever. You're never going to see that. Not that we, obviously now we have trucks and trains. But yeah, when we started saying, this is my property, and therefore I'm going to put it into a place with barbed wire and fencing, any type of community that had that, it's property ownership in general as a cultural piece is a really important thing that I don't think a lot of people recognize. It's the idea of collectivism versus individualism, and a lot of that comes from property ownership and money. So as soon as Western culture started utilizing money and farming and property ownership, that then leads to what we see today. But that's
Mhm.
thousands of years and of history that's affecting us. But I think it's worth studying and being interested in, like, not that there's a huge history of economic development, but when you look at social history over time, I think there's a lot of things that play into this. And part of this is why I've enjoyed learning so much from tribal nations,
Yeah.
because there are so many interesting books about how this stratification and what this moment in time when we changed from that type of culture that has led to what we see now, that I think is really fascinating.
If you had a wonderful magical wand that you could wave.
Oh God. Okay. Where is it going? It's gonna scare me. Go ahead.
No, a magical wand you could wave tomorrow. Is there any, let's say, policy change that you would make?
Okay. Well, I feel like I should do. I want to give like an easy cop out answer because there's two things that are existing right
You
now.
could do that.
But first things first, they're losing funding because less people are smoking. Like, yay, good thing, but bad for funding early childcare.
Okay.
So because less people are smoking, they're losing revenue, and the current way that they are funded is only through tobacco and not through vaping products. So if I were to wave a magic wand, me personally, because
Mhm.
I'm a big supporter of childcare support, so I'm not speaking on behalf of AAED, I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I personally would love to wave a wand and have that law passed so that they are then receiving the benefit of a vaping tax and are able to continue funding. Because to me, early childcare support is critical to families not only being able to be full thriving families, but also for those parents to then be a part of the workforce and for that future generation to receive the benefits of early education, where then they're able to participate in the workforce. So if I waved a magic wand, that would probably be one. Additionally, there are some key transportation bills that are coming up. There's some that are happening right now, but there's some that are going to be coming up in this legislature, some reauthorizations. Transportation benefits everybody. Investing in our infrastructure, which is so old and dilapidated and falling apart, is incredibly critical to our success as a state, but also just the movement of goods and people. Making sure that those things are reauthorized and funded, I think, is also, if I were to wave a magic wand tomorrow. And then the last thing I will say, again, this is a personal, not AED opinion, but I think there are innovations that need to be happening in energy at a rapid rate. So I was just reading an article about how the Tennessee Valley Authority just entered into an agreement with, hopefully I'm gonna get the names wrong, Kratos, where they're developing one of the first new nuclear reactors to exist in like 20 years. And they're hoping to have it online by 2030, which is pretty crazy. With another one, I think they're looking at for 2035. But I don't want anybody to rush. I want it to be safe and I want it to be done right. But it is clear that we need to find clean, energy efficient solutions, and we can't just keep twiddling our thumbs about that. So I'm really excited to be. Also, I'm a huge fan of nuclear. Like, I'm a big nerd about nuclear energy and love to learn about it. But I find that those types of things are interesting. And Tennessee Valley is now touting themselves as like the nuclear center, and the innovation center is like, oh, how can we get involved in this conversation and make sure that we're also the forefront of energy efficiency and energy innovation. So but that's me, not AAED.
Well, you've given me about 50 ideas for our next podcast. Alrighty, Katie Hurst, Arizona Association of Economic Development. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Always a pleasure. And we now have to have podcasts about every single one of our tangents.
Yeah, and it's just going to be called Tangents.
I like it.
Tangents by King Katie. I like it. We'll get more purple couches. Okay, guys, see you later.